Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome back to yet another game developer interview courtesy of Game Devs of Color Expo 2023. I'm the host of this amazing post-apocalyptic broadcast, The Purple Sharpie, but you can call me Sharpie if you're feeling especially special today. I happen to have two members of Miscellaneum Studios here today, both of which need absolutely no introduction, but I will give them one anyway. I'd love to introduce Lateef, the CEO and creative director of Miscellaneum Studios. Lateef, how is the air quality on this side of the late-stage capitalistic post-apocalyptic universe?
It's LA level smog, but I'm adapting. I'm adapting,
of course. Make sure you're wearing your mandated mask because as all else knows, we got to keep each other safe here. Now, I got to ask you, Alvin, otherwise known as the Animator on this project, how is it over on your side of the green zone?
It's great. Thanks for asking. Thanks for having
Thank you for being here. Now, I have to go back over to you, Lateef. I've been hearing a lot about this project, but I think maybe I'm getting a little bit distracted. Can you tell me about the very first game project that Miscellaneum Studios ever has released?
Yes, Distraction Machine is a music composition game where you create music to uplift and inspire your community during a zombie apocalypse. So you fulfill requests from NPCs to help them on their missions with your music, and you can either help them or harm them with your music.
Well, I'll tell you, that synopsis left me absolutely sated, but I think some of our audience members may be chomping at the bit to get some brains. So why don't we go ahead and roll this trailer? Now, Lateef, obviously that trailer was very, very, very much so based upon a post-apocalyptic world. We have tons of zombies everywhere, but against all odds, we also have music. That's a very, very unique take on the apocalyptic world that we often see associated with zombies. Talk to me about where that thought process came from and why you chose to specifically have that concept inside of this game.
Okay, well, actually, Distraction Machine was supposed to be a mini game within a larger game, which is supposed to be a tactical turn-based RPG. But we had difficulty getting funding for it because we have a funding body in Canada that supports games, and they're looking for more innovative stuff. So we went and kind of expanded on that idea. And this world is a cyclepunk world where everything's based on bikes. From instruments to weapons, equipment, gear. And since I have a background in music, I figured, every story I want to tell, I want to have music in that world. And I figured it'd be a great way to explore the world through music in that way.
I would actually really like to talk very briefly about your background, as it is obviously pertinent to this game. I understand that you originally grew up playing a certain instrument. You actually still perform today, and I happen to see behind you a musical instrument that you have showcased multiple times on the official Miscellaneum Studios YouTube page. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that instrument and some of your background inside of music, how that basically played into this game?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my brother's 10 years my senior, and he started beatboxing. So, of course, I started copying him. So beatboxing has always been a part of my life. Even though I've been drawing since I was a kid, music's kind of always been there and it's kind of caught up. So I've always been into music, whether it be like going to the arcade, listening to songs, coming home and then playing the music that I hear in the arcade, or just coming up with my own music. Actually, before the whole project started, I came up with a bike harp I call a Lateef. This is the latest iteration of it. It's a very old idea, but the idea was that, if I'm going to make music, let me base it on bike-based instruments, and the Lateef bike harp is at the core of this entire world musically.
I noticed that you've also performed a couple of times, specifically the theme song of this game that was actually created inside of this game. Was that intentional? Did you plan on actually creating the theme song for the game inside of the game itself?
Yeah, it totally got a little meta there. The other side of the game, because there's two sides of the game. Chronicle Mode is what I just described earlier, and Conductor Mode is where you treat the game as basically a music sequencer. So you're able to write your own original music with the game. There are also a bunch of loops in there for each instrument, so you can mix and match loops. So regardless of your musical proficiency, you can create music. And so there's always the intention of creating the music for the game by the game. And I thought that was really fun, especially doing music for the characters, music for the scenes, music just for the themes that are happening in the story. So yeah, it came together really nicely in that way.
I actually want to talk very briefly about some of the mechanics inside of the game. Specifically, I want to talk about the creation of the songs inside of the game that the distractor actually uses. Inside of the game, canonically, the player plays as the distractor, whose job is to basically fulfill, as you stated previously, different NPC requests to invigorate and also assault basically the zombies to kind of like make them weaker, or to basically make the people that are attacking the zombies stronger, which is a very important role inside of the game because it basically brings the troops together. The distractor is given 3 different tools basically to create music in universe. That is instruments, noisemaker, and chains. Talk to me about the thought process that went into the creation of so many different unique instruments similar to the one that you showcased previously.
Yeah, sure. So originally the idea behind Distraction Machine was based on a puzzle contest to create a discrete grid, a game that's puzzle based. So I figured, okay, well, how about we create a game where it's centered on a music box, and a music box had this grid of like maybe you have 2 or 4 or 9 spaces, and you fill them with instruments. And I built a variety of instruments based on bikes and sampled them for the game. For example, we have the Lateef bike harp here. I made a couple of different drums. I've got a shaker I made out of, I should show you all this stuff, but there's a lot of basically most of the instruments that are in the game are based on instruments I actually made in the real world. And then the idea was that, okay, let's make, going to, I'm sure a lot of people will remember The Incredible Machine, where it's a game where you have to do this ridiculously simple task in the most ridiculous way possible by like connecting things to make a chain reactive system. So that kind of was the inspiration for the music box, where the crank is the heart of the music box, just like it's the heart of your bike. It's what makes everything work. And connecting everything to gears and chains makes them work together. So the idea was that you have this puzzle mechanic where you have to make all these instruments work together through a series of gears, chains, and noisemakers. Noisemakers being batons and stuff to hit percussion instruments. So yeah,
It's really unique as well inside of the game. I apologize for interrupting, but I did just want to say it is really unique the way that you can go ahead and grab all of those different instruments to fulfill NPC requests. Did you happen to have a favorite instrument inside of the game?
Oof. That's the daddy, which is his favorite child. I mean, the Lithium is great because it has 24 strings. This one has 24 strings as well. So it's really nice to have two octaves to play with. And there's just so much possibility in there. And it's funny because in the game, you can play the Lithium in a way you can't in real life and vice versa. The cooler drum is great because it's literally a cooler bottle, a water cooler bottle. And there's just so many amazing tones you get out of it. Actually, the cookie tin is my favorite, because I was super surprised how many different tones I got out of the cookie tin. And it ain't no cookies in the tin. You know what's in there, right? We all know what's in there. So yeah, the cookie tin.
It ain't never cookies. It ain't never cookies. It's always buttons or threads or old used credit cards that don't work no more. Nobody got cookies in there.
Expired.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Went dark.
I feel you.
Went dark for a second. Alvin, I want to take a moment and actually very briefly talk on my emotional discourse that I felt there, because actually inside of the game, after you deliver the songs to NPCs, there is also a very emotional response depending on whether or not that song meet all the characteristics that that NPC was looking for. And I understand that you animated quite a few of those reaction scenes. Can you talk to me about what went into the creation of those scenes and what empathetically were the tones that you researched or tried to put into some of those scenes?
Well, yeah. So through different types of techniques, so certain moods I was trying to accomplish. So whether or not you made a successful, had a successful mission, or if whether your mission failed, I used different techniques such as like the different lighting, or there was like camera shakes that I would add to it. There was a lot of depth of field just to get a little bit of the mood going. But I just really wanted to portray whether or not something was very hopeless or something was becoming more hopeful, just to get the good reaction from the player on whether or not they failed or whether or not they succeeded.
Did you happen to have a reaction moment that you were very, very proud of creating inside of the game that you feel comfortable describing?
Yeah, so there's one particular scene where there was a very distinct mood I was creating with lightning and rain and getting a really dark atmosphere for one of the cutscenes. And as you get more lightning appears, certain aspects of the background begin to appear. So you see different more of the zombies, or more of the what were they called again, Lateef, that appeared in the background?
You had the oh my God, you had the Wranglers. Yeah.
The Wranglers, yes.
Yeah.
So Wranglers would appear in the background as more lightning would strike. So getting the timing and the mood right as lightning appears was a big part of that scene, and I was pretty proud of that one.
That's awesome. I actually want to state that when I was playing through the game, one of my favorite moments was seeing whether or not the NPCs reacted to some of my drill beats inside of the game, or if they really just thought that they were completely uncreative and derivative. And most of the time it was the latter, but I just stand by the fact that they're not necessarily tastemakers, they're assassins, and I stand confident in what I created. Lateef, I want to go back to you for the final question here, and it's a relatively simple question. I'll go ahead and paint the picture. Obviously, we currently live inside of what most would consider a late-stage capitalistic society inside of North America. We live at a point in time where musicians, specifically artists, aren't necessarily appreciated unless their accomplishments or creations garner a large amount of monetary wealth. And that's just one of the very many byproducts that we explore inside of this game. I want to talk very briefly about your experience as an artist, as a performer, as a composer, and as a creative director of a company, creating a game specifically where the primary role that the player occupies is considered very, very important, both in universe and in general. Why did you choose to make music so incredibly important inside of this game?
It's interesting how things lined up. We started the game at the outset of the pandemic in 2020. I know it was COVID-19, November 19, but more in March is when things started to pop off. And it's interesting, if you recall, music and art was really pushed to the forefront. Where like you had people playing on balconies and people singing along, and actually in Canada, the government actually put millions of dollars into supporting artists and to giving us money to perform and create art. And there was a kind of surge of appreciation of art, at least in Canada, to a point. So I thought that was important, and also the fact that music is a universal language. It's used, within all cultures. It's used to pump up people for battle. It's used, during storytelling. It's used during ceremonies and unions and funerals. So it's the lifeblood of humanity. And I just felt it was such a really good thing to kind of tap into in a zombie apocalypse, or as we call them in the game, feeders. So a feeder apocalypse. But yeah, I just really wanted to tap into that. And it's interesting because one of the big things about this whole world, where you have Distraction Machine, which is set 7 years during a 7-year war against the undead. It's actually a prequel to a comic book series that we released called Xyle. And Xyle, we're 6 issues in. It starts 7 years after. So the game story ends just before a comic book starts. And the whole thing about Xyle and Distraction Machine was that we wanted to kind of flip things on their head. For example, you have a character called Heidevar, who's this kind of velo or cycle Viking, and he was a LARPer in the old world. And a lot of people look at LARPers as losers or geeks, but in the apocalypse, he is a badass. He survived this long. So the idea of how musicians and artists aren't appreciated in our world right now, in the zombie apocalypse, they're even more important. They help us reconnect with everyone, and they chronicle events, and they tell stories, and they bring us together. So I really wanted to kind of look at flipping things in terms of how we appreciate art, and how important our expression is in a world where all the rules are out the window now.
Lateef and Alvin, thank you so much for discussing the amazing very first game project your studio has ever come out with, Distraction Machine. It was a pleasure speaking with you both in this interview.
Thanks for having us.
Ooh, amazing tunes to leave on. Now, audience, if you enjoyed this amazing serenade on your eardrums, make sure that you check out even more of Miscellaneum Studios on Instagram at Miscellaneum_Studios. And a little birdie told me that you can actually hear some amazing musical covers of the Mario and Zelda variety on their SoundCloud. Visit bit.ly/Distraction Machine on SoundCloud. That's going to do it for this video game interview, but stay tuned. We have even more Game Devs of Color Expo 2023 coming up right after I get these supplies, because the zombies got back into the cache.